The night before my wedding, I signed a piece of paper that would haunt my mother for the rest of her life. I knew she would hate it. I also knew it was the kind of move that would pull decades of family tension to the surface in one electric instant. My name is Claire Anderson, and tomorrow I would be Mrs. Harrison. Tonight, though, I was a bride-to-be standing in the eye of a storm I had spent 30 years anticipating. The Grandview Hotel Ballroom in Manhattan, stretched out like a cathedral of gold and crystal, the chandeliers dripping light over tables groaning under the weight of silver candelabras, champagne flutes, and the faint aroma of roasted duck. 200 of the city's most influential figures murmured, laughed, clinked glasses, unaware that beneath the elegance, a confrontation was poised to erupt. I could feel it. My chest tightened as I surveyed the room, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor as I walked past servers balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres. Every glimmering reflection in the polished surfaces seemed to watch me, judge me, anticipate what I would do next. Jake Harrison, my fiancé, was at my side, his hand solid and warm, resting lightly on my lower back. He wasn't flashy. He wore a simple navy suit that fit him perfectly, understated yet precise. But he was my anchor. Jake was a cybersecurity engineer, a man who saw the vulnerabilities in every system, the backdoors no one else noticed. And for me, he saw the cracks in my armor, the old scars my family had left, and instead of exploiting them, he built a fortress around me. I would need that fortress tonight. Across the room, the Andersons were already in motion. My mother, Linda, gliding like a predator in dove-gray silk, pearls clinking softly against her chest, smiled at the guests with the practiced politeness of a diplomat and the subtle menace of a strategist. Every nod, every laugh was a calculation. She had always treated family as an emotional corporation, and she was the CEO. She believed she could distribute or seize what she deemed valuable, and for decades, I had been her unwitting conduit, absorbing her ambitions, mitigating her chaos, and sacrificing my own desires for her convenience. And then there was Holly, my younger sister, radiant in an emerald gown that clung to her like a second skin. She leaned against the 5-tiered cake, flute of champagne in hand, a faint smirk playing on her lips. She was beautiful, yes, but beautiful like a weapon, trained to extract attention, to claim entitlement. She had grown up expecting the universe to bend to her whims. My wants, my dreams, my achievements, they had always been raw material for her consumption. My father, Robert, stood silently at the bar, a perpetual witness to Linda's performances. People would describe him as quiet, reserved, but his silence was complicity. Every unfair decision, every moment of coercion he had allowed. His avoidance of confrontation had always been the final seal on my family's manipulation. I inhaled, letting the perfume of the evening mingle with my own adrenaline. I introduced myself briefly to the few guests I knew personally, explaining my work as an interior designer, my obsession with lines, space, and boundaries. I build rooms that protect people, not just houses, I said, letting my words hang. Everyone nodded politely. They didn't know that tonight, those boundaries would not be metaphoric. They would be literal, tested against a lifetime of manipulation. The orchestra swelled softly, a classical string piece that was meant to lull the room into complacency, but I felt it differently. It was a countdown. My mother, gliding between tables, gathered congratulations like trophies. I kept my smile tight, polished, the one I had practiced for 30 years. Jake leaned in, his voice barely above the music. "Are you ready?" he whispered. His eyes, calm and steady, met mine. There was no doubt, no hesitation. He trusted me to execute the plan we had crafted in secret over the past month. A plan that would finally turn the tables, finally establish the line I had been forced to redraw countless times in my own head. I nodded. "I'm ready," I said. My voice was steady, controlled, the kind that didn't betray the storm inside. Tonight, I was not the timid daughter absorbing every injustice. Tonight, I was the architect of a new reality. And then my eyes found them. My mother, my sister, my father. The familiar constellation of manipulation and entitlement, smiling, laughing, assuming I would react as I always had. But I wouldn't. Not tonight. I took a breath and imagined the room frozen for a second. The chandeliers, the clinking glasses, the soft hum of conversation suspended as every eye focused on me. My plan was in motion, and the first domino was already trembling. Jake's hand pressed lightly on my back again, and I felt the solid reassurance that I was not alone. Together, we would draw the first lines of a fortress that no greed, no manipulation, no familial entitlement could ever breach. The night had only just begun, and the storm I had spent my life anticipating was about to break. The moment my family entered the ballroom, I felt the temperature drop, as if the air itself recognized the storm they carried. Linda, radiant in her dove-gray silk, moved with the effortless command of someone accustomed to having her will obeyed. Every gesture, every smile, every nod was precise, like a general positioning troops for battle. Holly followed her, emerald gown glinting under the chandelier light, champagne flute balanced in one hand, the faintest smirk curling at the corner of her lips. She was beautiful, yes, but dangerous in the way beauty can be. Sharp, deliberate, and unapologetically self-serving. Robert, my father, trailed slightly behind, hands clasped loosely in front of him, silent as ever. He was the shadow that enabled Linda, a passive participant in decades of manipulation. His quiet was not peace, it was compliance. And tonight, as I watched them approach, I could feel the tension coil in the room, threading through the murmurs of the guests. The announcement of the Penthouse had just concluded. Jake's parents had stepped down from the podium, leaving the air thick with admiration, applause, and a hint of envy. And then, as I suspected, Linda's eyes caught the gift. They narrowed, sharp, assessing. "Claire?" she said, her voice light but calculated, floating over the polished marble floors like silk sliding against stone. "That's quite generous of the Harrisons. A penthouse, really. It's beautiful, but don't you think it's just a bit much for someone like you?" I tilted my head, holding her gaze. "It's perfect, Mom," I said calmly, letting the words land in the space between us, soft yet immovable. Her smile widened, a thin, predatory curve. "Of course, darling, I'm thrilled for you, but you know Holly. She's starting her new career next month, the magazine launch, all her events. Wouldn't it make more sense for her to have such a space? Central, elegant, suitable for someone with her lifestyle." A ripple passed through the crowd. Forks froze mid-air, champagne glasses hesitated halfway to lips. A collective breath held as all eyes gradually found me. My mother's voice carried effortlessly, projecting authority, charm, and the faintest trace of threat. She was presenting a proposition disguised as concern, cloaked in civility, but I felt the sharp edge beneath it. I set my jaw, my fingers brushing the silk of my gown. "Mom," I said, each syllable precise, controlled. "That's a generous suggestion." "Exactly," she replied, leaning closer, eyes glinting. "You work from home half the time anyway. You could manage perfectly from anywhere. But Holly, she needs a space like this. You understand, it's for the family." The words landed like stones in a glass pond. For a fraction of a second, time slowed. I could feel the weight of every history, every slight, every betrayal converging here, in front of Jake's parents, the guests, the photographers. The penthouse was not just a gift, it was a target, a temptation my family could not resist, and my mother's hand had already been extended. I let a measured breath escape. "I understand," I said evenly, though my heart raced. My voice carried a calm I did not feel, a calm designed to mask the storm inside. I was no longer the compliant daughter who bent to Linda's will. I was aware, fully, strategically aware. Holly, sensing her mother's opportunity, adjusted her posture, the smirk sharpening. She leaned against the side of the cake, casual, poised, but her eyes were predators sizing up a potential prey. Every guest could see it. Every guest was waiting for me to falter, to yield, to offer the expected acquiescence she expected me to fold as I always had. I didn't. I let my gaze sweep over the room, noting reactions. Jake's hand rested lightly on the small of my back, a quiet anchor. He wasn't doing anything yet, just present, ready. The control was mine. The moment was mine. I felt the familiar adrenaline, the old tension of a lifetime spent navigating their whims, but this time it was harnessed, purposeful. Linda continued, oblivious to the storm coiling beneath my composed exterior. "It's really for the best, Claire. Considerate, practical, reasonable, generous. You've always shared. That's what families do, right?" "Yes," I said, voice measured. "Families share, Mom. But sharing works both ways, doesn't it?" A flicker crossed her eyes. A hesitation so brief it could have been missed by anyone not watching closely. It was the tiniest imperceptible slip of her carefully constructed mask. The air in the room tightened, anticipation palpable, as if the chandeliers themselves were leaning in. Holly shifted, clearly registering the crack in the armor. She moved slightly forward, testing, probing. "Really, Claire?" she said, the casual boredom of her tone trying to mask a calculated edge. "Are you saying no?" I held her gaze, letting the room absorb the tension. My heart pounded, but my exterior remained a mask of control. I did not answer yet. Not fully. Not until I understood the measure of their overreach, the depth of their expectation, and the absolute precision required for what I had planned. In that suspended moment, I realized everything I had prepared, every subtle maneuver over decades, had led to this confrontation. The penthouse, the room, the watchful guests, it was all part of a stage. And I was ready to act. But that action, that revelation, would have to wait. For now, I stood, steady, controlled, anchored by Jake's presence, and let the tension coil around us, waiting for the moment it would snap. I breathed in the air, scented with roses, polished marble, and fine perfume. This was the first move in a game decades in the making. And tonight, for the first time, I would not be the pawn. After the dinner ended and the guests were beginning to drift between tables, Jake and I slipped away to a quiet corner near the grand terrace. The noise of the ballroom softened behind the heavy double doors, though I could still hear the low hum of conversation and the faint clink of glasses. In that moment, with the city lights stretching out below us like a web of fireflies, we began discussing the plan we had meticulously crafted for weeks. "This trust is ironclad," Jake said, spreading out the documents on the marble ledge. "Any attempt to transfer the penthouse, co-opt access, or misrepresent authority, in whole or in part, triggers immediate civil penalties. We've also made ourselves the sole trustees." His voice was calm, clinical, like a surgeon explaining an operation. I felt a flicker of reassurance. His precision was the counterweight to my long-standing wariness. I nodded, tracing the elegant lines of the trust document with my fingertip. "And the night sentinel system?" I asked. "All cameras live? Audio? Sensors?" Jake smirked. "Everything. 4K video in every common area. Microphones so sensitive they pick up a whisper, magnetic and vibration sensors on doors and sliding panels, and every event logged and uploaded to the cloud in real time. Immutable. Tamper-proof. If anyone even thinks about crossing the line, we'll know. And legally, they'll be toast." I let out a slow breath, feeling a cold, hard clarity settle over me. This wasn't paranoia. It was justice. Every moment of my past had prepared me for this confrontation. I thought back, as I often did when a plan was finally within reach, to the years I had been the family's shock absorber. I remembered standing on a stool at 9 years old to scrub dishes my sister refused to touch. At 12, I was mowing lawns that belonged to everyone but me. At 16, I had given up my spot on the debate team, the scholarship I had worked toward, so Holly could attend a wellness retreat in Switzerland. My savings for a certificate in advanced interior design, over $20,000, had been quietly redirected to cover Holly's new BMW when she swerved, she claimed, to avoid a squirrel. My throat had tightened at the memory. The world had taught me to be soft, to absorb pain, to be invisible when the cost was my own potential. But tonight, those lessons had forged me into something else. Something cold, something deliberate, something unbreakable. I looked at Jake. His hand rested lightly on mine. "We're ready," he said. "Once they try to take what's theirs by right, or what they think is theirs, we let them. We don't intervene. The law, the system, the cameras, they'll do the work for us." I smiled, a thin, controlled smile, feeling the steel in my spine that had been tempered over decades. "It's all bait," I said. "Every inch of the penthouse, every policy, every sensor. It's a test of their greed. And tonight, they'll fail, just as they always have." We walked through the small kitchen adjacent to the ballroom, reviewing the placement of the decoy key I had designed. A heavy bronze piece, ornate but useless, meant to lure Holly's curiosity. Anyone who attempted to use it would trigger a precise chain of data. Access logs, biometric capture, time-stamped video and audio. Jake had smiled when I suggested the extra layer. The night sentinel would catch everything. Every step. Every misstep. I remembered the first time I had seen him, in my small, leased studio apartment. I had just installed reclaimed hardwood floors, hung lighting I designed to maximize natural shadows, and patched the last wall I had painted myself. My data, my invoices, my clients' designs, all vulnerable. He had assessed my network in 2 hours flat, identifying gaps I didn't even know existed. "You've built a brick-and-mortar fortress," he had said, "but your digital doors are wide open." That calm observation had fascinated me. He had not just noticed weaknesses, he had offered the solution, a measured, intelligent fix that didn't remove control from me. Now, years later, that same precision applied to my family. The Night Sentinel wasn't just a security system, it was a mirror, reflecting every intent, every move, every moment of hubris back at its source. And in that reflection, my mother and sister would see their own greed laid bare. I ran my fingers over the smooth marble again. Every detail mattered. The placement of cameras hidden in vents, microphones recessed in crown molding, sensors on every sliding door. Every log would be recorded, uploaded, hashed, and timestamped. Nothing could be contested. Nothing could be denied. This was not just protection, it was preparation for accountability. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of my history settle fully in me. The sacrifices, the betrayals, the years of invisibility, they were the mortar that held the structure of my resolve together. I was no longer just Claire Anderson, the obedient daughter. I was Claire Harrison, architect of her own fortress, builder of lines no one could cross without consequence. Jake leaned close, voice low. "Ready to see the storm unfold?" I smiled, not the hesitant, fearful smile I had once worn, but one edged with anticipation and hard-earned confidence. "Yes," I whispered. "Let them come." The city lights shimmered below us, indifferent to the history, the planning, the quiet war about to erupt. But inside me, everything was aligned. Every sensor, every legal clause, every carefully placed trap was ready. Tonight, my past, my pain, and my patience would converge into a single, unyielding force. Tonight, for the first time in my life, I would not be the cushion. I would be the line. And the line, I thought, was unbreakable. The air in the ballroom thickened as Linda leaned closer, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Claire, darling, truly, it would make more sense if Holly had the penthouse. She's starting a new chapter. All those events, her lifestyle. You understand, right?" Every word was a carefully sharpened blade, aimed at testing the limits of my composure. I felt the weight of every gaze in the room, 200 pairs of eyes collectively holding their breath. I straightened in my chair, the silk of my gown shifting softly against the table, and let the moment stretch. Then I reached into my clutch and pulled out the trust documents, crisp, freshly notarized, the blue ink of the seal gleaming under the chandelier light. "Yes, Mom," I said, voice clear and deliberate, carrying to the edges of the room. "That's a bold suggestion, and it's precisely why this document exists." I placed the papers on the table and began reading aloud. "Be it known, the penthouse at Grandview Towers is the sole property of Claire Anderson and Jake Harrison. Any attempt to co-opt, assign, or interfere with ownership without our explicit, physically present, notarized consent shall be rendered immediately null and void." The room fell silent, the low hum of conversation evaporating into a thick, expectant hush. Linda's smile faltered, just a fraction, her carefully maintained mask cracking. Hazel, ever alert, was already scanning, lips twitching as her eyes landed on the bronze decoy key I had intentionally placed in the kitchen drawer, a bait designed to reveal intent. "Really, Claire?" Hazel's voice was soft, feigning casual curiosity. But I saw it, the flicker of calculation, the predator behind the princess facade. She slipped from the table, moving toward the drawer with the precision of someone who had practiced every step. I let her approach, heart steady, knowing every move was already being recorded. The Night Sentinel system was alive. 4K cameras captured every angle. Microphones picked up the faintest whisper. Door and window sensors logged vibrations, and elevator activity was recorded in real time. Every keystroke, every misstep, every fingerprint she left would be digitally sealed and time-stamped. Hazel reached the drawer, fumbling with the key. The click echoed slightly, the moment amplified through the hidden sensors. She yanked it, and the drawer sprang open, but empty. The trap had sprung perfectly. I felt Jake's hand on my back, steady, grounding. He whispered, "They're on the hook. Everything is logged. Ready for Mara's move?" I nodded imperceptibly. Across the room, Mara Quinn, our legal counsel, moved with silent efficiency. She had been watching the ballroom via secure feed, phone in hand, poised to transform this civil violation into something far more consequential. A subtle tap, and the emergency injunction activated. Emails, legal notifications, time-stamped video, all sent instantly to Linda, Hazel, and Robert, and simultaneously to the Westport police. The first domino fell. Linda's composure wavered as her phone buzzed insistently. She glanced at the screen, eyes widening in disbelief. "What is this?" she hissed under her breath. Hazel froze mid-step, realizing the system had caught everything. Her attempted entry, the fingerprints on the drawer, her unauthorized elevator access. I stood, the cool clarity of decades of preparation settling over me. My childhood, the years I had spent absorbing every slight, giving up every opportunity, saving while others consumed, had forged this moment. I was no longer the silent cushion. I was the architect of accountability. Linda stepped forward, hands raised in mock shock, her voice rising. "This is outrageous! You're trying to ruin us! Claire, this is your wedding!" I held her gaze, voice steady and unflinching. "Mom, this isn't personal. It's legal. Ownership is clear. Boundaries are non-negotiable. Every action you've just taken has been documented, time-stamped, and reported." Holly's fiancé, Mason, watched silently from across the room, his face paling as he absorbed the implications. The panic that crept into his features mirrored the unraveling of the life they had assumed would be theirs. For a split second, I saw the calculation in Hazel's eyes. She had underestimated me, underestimated the precision of the plan, underestimated the fact that my defenses were now immovable. The first uniformed officer entered, calm, professional, exuding authority without hysteria. The click of handcuffs, the calm declaration of a legal arrest, reverberated through the room like a tolling bell. Linda shrieked, incredulous, but the evidence, backed by technology and law, was indisputable. Hazel cried out, helpless, her dreams collapsing as Mason subtly stepped back, aligning himself with reality rather than fantasy. I felt Jake's hand squeeze mine, a quiet pulse of solidarity. The ballroom, once a shimmering stage of celebration, had transformed into an arena of justice, the weight of decades of manipulation being lifted in real time. Every whisper, every gasp, every flash of camera phones only confirmed the magnitude of the reversal. Linda, Hazel, and Robert were being led away, defeated, cuffed, exposed. I stood at the head table, gown brushing the floor, eyes scanning the guests. The moment was a testament to control reclaimed, a statement that boundaries would no longer be violated, that abuse, even by family, had limits. Jake leaned close, voice low against my ear. "They've triggered every clause. Every record is immutable. You're untouchable now." I exhaled, finally letting the weight release. The penthouse, our future, my autonomy. It was no longer a target. It was ours. And the lesson was carved into the minds of those who thought they could cross me. Tonight, the party was over in more ways than one. But as the lights dimmed and the first strains of music returned, I felt freedom, control, and vindication in every fiber of my being. I had survived the storm of my past, and for the first time, I was entirely, utterly free. The Grandview Hotel ballroom was heavy with silence, the kind that made every crystal on the chandeliers seem to tremble. The air still hummed with tension, the echo of the handcuffs clicking against metal like a distant drum. I stood at the center, Claire Harrison, bride, and finally, architect of my own life, and I let the weight of 30 years of fear and obligation fall away in a slow, deliberate exhale. I looked across the room at our guests, hundreds of eyes now fixed on me, the room a sea of anticipation and curiosity. My hand found Jake's, and I squeezed it lightly. He was steady, a solid anchor, eyes calm but bright with pride. I lifted my voice, clear, resonant, unshakable. "The penthouse at Grandview Towers," I began, letting each word land like a small hammer, "is the sole property of Jake Harrison and me. Any claims, any assumptions, any attempts to circumvent that ownership are invalid and unenforceable. This is our home, our future, and our boundaries are non-negotiable." A collective hush rippled through the room, the kind that made even the chandeliers seem to hold their breath. I could see the whispered panic on the faces of those who had expected me to falter. My mother, Linda, now seated in the corner with her hands folded, was pale and tight-lipped, caught in the harsh glare of accountability. Hazel, her usual smirk replaced by a taut line of disbelief, realized her little games had failed spectacularly. Even Robert, who had spent decades co-signing their manipulations with silence, looked smaller than ever, an unmoored shadow of authority. I felt Jake's grip on my hand tighten, and I allowed myself a faint, triumphant smile. The tension that had gripped my chest for years, the invisible chains of obligation, guilt, and fear, was finally gone. The trap we had laid, the meticulous legal and technological preparation, had worked perfectly. Every move, every misstep of my family had been captured, time-stamped, and logged. They had played their part, and the system had delivered justice without me having to lift a finger beyond what I already had. The soft hum of anticipation broke as the lighting slowly shifted. The warm gold uplighting returned, bathing the room in soft, forgiving light. The string quartet lifted their bows, and the first notes of music, joyous and familiar, began to flow through the space. Confetti cannons fired, a blizzard of white and gold glittering like shards of celebration, swirling around us, catching in hair and on the edges of gowns. I looked at Jake, and he laughed, a sound full of unburdened delight, the kind of laugh that reaches your bones and shakes loose the last remnants of fear. I let myself fall into it, matching him in movement and spirit, the long-repressed joy of being fully, unapologetically free spilling out in my smile. "Shall we dance?" I asked, almost rhetorically, knowing the answer before it was given. He pulled me gently toward the floor, and we moved together, swaying in rhythm with the music. Not just as a couple, not just as bride and groom, but as partners, allies, co-architects of the life we were about to build. Every step on the polished floor was an echo of reclamation, a statement that the past could not touch us anymore. The guests began to join, laughter returning in a wave, cautious at first, then wholehearted. The initial shock of what had transpired, the handcuffs, the legal warnings, the exposure, gave way to awe, then celebration. Friends and family, colleagues, acquaintances who had been watching the unfolding drama in stunned fascination now clapped, cheered, and joined in the revelry. It was a catharsis, a release, the very air seeming to vibrate with collective relief. I turned, taking in the scene, allowing my gaze to rest for a moment on the wide-open doors of the ballroom. Beyond them, the Manhattan skyline glittered against the night, indifferent yet somehow mirroring our victory. The city's lights reminded me that the world is vast, that opportunity stretches beyond family greed, beyond old patterns. Tonight, we had claimed our space, our security, our agency. Confetti swirled in slow motion like eddies around us as I twirled, Jake's hands firm and protective on my waist. In that moment, the penthouse, the trust, the night sentinel, it all became more than just legal protection. It became a symbol, a line drawn, a fortress erected, a life rebuilt. Freedom was tangible, radiant, and utterly ours. I allowed myself to laugh openly, unself-conscious, a release decades overdue. The ballroom, once a stage of tension and manipulation, was now a canvas of celebration. Our first dance ended, but the energy remained. Guests joined in, dancing, laughing, the music lifting spirits as confetti settled into sparkling carpets of white and gold. I glanced at the service doors, thinking of the family who had tried to manipulate and steal from me for decades. They were gone, escorted out quietly but irrevocably. Their presence, their influence, null. I felt no anger, no revenge, just a quiet satisfaction, a recognition that boundaries had been set and respected. The storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. Jake leaned down, lips near my ear, voice low, teasing and joyful. "We did it. The line is drawn, and it's perfect." I rested my head against his shoulder, letting the music and the celebration wash over me. "It's our start," I whispered. "No fear, no interference, just us." As the night stretched on, the confetti falling like snow around our guests, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in decades. Completely, utterly, unshakably free. This was the start of a new chapter, a life designed and protected by me, defended and celebrated with the man I loved beside me. If you've listened from the very beginning, I want to hear from you. Did you enjoy this story? What themes or struggles would you like me to explore in future tales? Please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories from women reclaiming their lives, their boundaries, and their power. The night was ours, the music soared, and the doors to our new life swung wide open.